well, this might be a good place to put the rest of our committee reports on the back burner while we keep to our schedule and hear from our guest, Michael Withey. He's going to have some great news for us, I think, about small houses as housing solutions. And he'll be with us in just a moment.
Hello to everybody. My name is Michael Withey. I'm a homeless advocate here in Portland. This right here is Dave Cardinal. He is one of the executives at Home First Development. Him and Rob Justice build low-income housing here in Portland. That rents about half of what typical low-income housing rents for. That's Home First Development. They build apartments. That has nothing to do with the eco-communities. These are tech dwell units. They're designed out of Hillsboro, Oregon here. And so before we go any further, I'm just going to introduce Dave Cardinal and just have him describe what he's doing with Home First Development and low-income housing.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us this evening. As you mentioned, Rob Justice and I have been developing housing in probably the last 3 years. We've developed 75 units over the last 3 years. Most of them right around $70,000 a door, about a third of what others are doing it for. And we came up with a very efficient model to put people in housing. We tried to focus on a market that for individuals that make about $20,000 and can afford about $600 to $650 rents. As we've been doing that, so we did 75 units earlier. We've got another 100 units planned for this year, working in conjunction with the Portland Rehabilitation Center. And what we're finding is that, well, that covers individuals making $20,000. Believe me, these things don't stay on the market very long at $600 or $650 rents. We're finding more and more individuals that are in making wages that are putting them at levels of $5,000, $15,000, and many of these are homeless individuals. But they're being forced out of the housing market completely as rents continue to go up in Portland. So we have been developing this tech dwell concept. It was something that Tim Cornell, who was an engineer, architect, contractor, does it all. He's been all over the world looking at various needs throughout the world, particularly in areas of disaster. I met him about 4 or 5 years ago, and we put together our first model that we took down to Haiti right after the earthquake. And since then, we've been shipping houses to Haiti over the last 2 or 3 years. What we started to realize that even though some of these other countries where there's 700 or 800,000 people homeless, we have some of the same issues here. And we have to get to some level so that we can start supporting people, particularly those people that do have some level of income. Maybe they can afford a $200 or $300 rent level. And so that's where tech dwell came into play. We met with Amanda Fritz a while ago. She sent us over to BDS, to make sure that this concept of a house, a modular house like this could be deployed in Portland. And most of you know, who's been around the building industry in Portland, is a pretty tall hurdle to get approved by the city, but they saw that it met the requirements of code. And so we've been working on doing another prototype in Portland. We've had recent conversations with the county about this idea of a small community. And they're very interested in working with churches and other entities that have land that don't necessarily have the resources but want to reach out to support homeless organizations, homeless individuals. So that's what we're about. If Tim was here, I'd have him describe the house, and he can do it much better than I can, but I'll give it a shot. It is a steel frame system. It's been tested for earthquakes and hurricanes, against Dade County standards for hurricanes. A couple of the unique features of the house is one is its price. We're trying to build these for less than $10,000 a unit for 200 square feet. And the second thing we're trying to do is make sure that people understand that these are something that you can do yourself. And so it builds a community by having people participate in the construction of their own home. And so we find that a powerful message as well. Right now we're, actually I think Tim may be on his way to China. We're trying to find some good strategic partners. We have a lot of interest from other Philippines and other areas where disaster recovery is such a huge issue, housing is an issue. But again, I think we can deploy these homes in Portland as well.
Right. So these units could go for about $10,000, and they would rent for about $250. We have Meg in the audience back there. Meg makes about she gets a check for about $700 a month. So $700 a month, as we all can imagine, doesn't really allow you to rent your own apartment and pay your bills. So she's exactly the type of person or situation that we're looking for to fill up these eco communities. The federal government says that 40% of the people living on the street have an income, whether it's SSI or SSD or whatever income it is. They have a monthly income, they just can't afford to live anywhere. So we can either build tiny studio apartments like they are in the Pearl. The micro units in the Pearl start at $800 for a small micro unit. If we're going to actually do anything about the thousands of homeless people in Portland, the Portland that are homeless, we're going to have to do something like this because we can't go on building these humongous buildings that cost $30 million, $40 million, and they house 130 people. Bud Commons is a perfect example of that. They have 130 apartments. It costs $47 million to build, and it costs $500,000 to keep every year. So how do 130 people count as more than the 2,500 or so that are staying on the street? So we are definitely going to have to do something like these tech-well units if we're ever going to end homelessness in the city of Portland. So the main reason why we're here today is because we know that you guys are going to put together some suggestions for City Hall and let them know what you think are the answers to homelessness. And we're counting on you guys to let them know that they're going to have to start thinking outside of the box. And these big, huge developments can't go on any longer because it's just not addressing the issue.
Well, the other thing we're seeing, and this goes not only on what we're doing for people with $20,000, but also for the smaller units, we're finding that a number of things are happening in Portland. One is rents are continuing to go up 6 or 7% a year. We see the level of funding for affordable housing decline rapidly as HUD and other programs being cut back. We see a lot of the new construction that's going in Portland is kind of aimed at that $50,000 or $60,000 level position, and so rents are getting up to $1,500, $1,600, which is causing all rents to go up. And at the same time, we're just not seeing a lot out of the public sector in terms of new units that are really aimed at affordability. And so we've got this good thing, I guess, is that we're seeing 5,000 to 10,000 people coming into the city every year. So we've got this almost this perfect storm, I guess, of huge demand for units, low supply. We're already at a deficit of somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 affordable units. And it's just going to continue to escalate as we find ourselves being cut back on federal support money, and at the same time seeing rents go up. So it's time to sort of begin to think about other options. And I'm not saying this is the only option, there may be other great ideas out there. It's just one that I think does have some merit and can support a lot of people in very low costs. I did bring, I didn't realize how many people here, this is an article of Lawyers and Company about interesting about it is not only just from a social responsibility standpoint, but just from an economic standpoint. They cite some numbers that other cities have done studies that it costs upwards of $16,000 a year to support someone living on the streets. Which, when you put it into those economic terms, it doesn't seem like a huge stretch to think that maybe you could spend $10,000 and put it into a safe and dry and a supportive environment. You know, I've sort of been rambling, but I appreciate, because I'm still trying to understand this homeless issue, which I'm sure everybody is. I've had conversations with Portland Business Alliance. Here's Tim Cordell.
I'm not late, traffic.
This is Tim from Tech Valley Design, use Tech Valley units.
Welcome. And I was going to almost butcher the discussion by describing what it is, but you're probably much better at doing it.
We might let our chair do a time check, just so you guys know
Okay.
where we're at with that. I think
Sure.
You might want to offer us some time for questions.
Yeah. Yes.
We have about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
You may have already said this part, but do any lower income eco communities currently exist in the metropolitan area?
No.
Okay.
This article indicates there's a village up in Olympia, and it's quite similar to some of the things that evolved in Portland, where there was a group of individuals living on the streets that came together and decided that maybe they could attract the supportive funding and systems that are necessary to move to outside the city. And they were able to get a piece of land that the city owned, which is out in a light industrial area, and they built 30 units. And I don't necessarily agree with numbers, because somehow those units managed to cost $85,000 each per unit, $87,000 per unit for 150 square feet. But nevertheless, their intentions were good. The economics just hard to understand. But as I started to say, there's a lot of folks kind of trying to get their heads around the whole issue of homelessness. And I appreciate any thoughts you might have or questions you might have about these housing in the context of how do we support the homeless population.
Have you gotten to the point where you've identified any possible locations for these kinds of, for a community, and talked to anybody in those areas about whether that would be viable?
Yeah, we did. We had a discussion, meeting with the Neighborhood Association of Lents, and we're having another one at St. John's. Lents was an interesting organization. They said, well, they have to live somewhere. We already have a lot of individuals in our community now who are low income, and in many cases living on the streets, or in some cases maybe sharing an apartment with somebody, or just for couch surfing or whatever. But they said, we've already committed to supporting our community, supporting our neighbors, and if this is part of our neighborhood, we want to support it. So I think that was kind of the attitude they took.
The Lents Neighborhood Association actually voted unanimously. Not just the board members that were present, but everybody at the meeting was able to vote whether they wanted to move forward with an eco-village and let's go forward with the planning. And unanimously, everybody said yes. Not one person stood aside or voted no.
So what needs to happen for you to make that happen?
Well, the second part of your question was, it becomes a zoning issue also. Where do you find a piece of property that has the correct zoning to put multiple units on the land? What we try to identify as high density zoning, where in the case of one piece of property that I'm familiar with, is basically 70 by 300. Where a house exists in the front, could be used for a support unit, and you could put 25 units in the back and still have a nice community feel to it, where there could be areas for gardening and other outdoor amenities. So the land exists. It's just finding the right zoning that allows you to put multiple units. And the other one that I mentioned was the church community. We're meeting with them tomorrow. In some cases, churches have more land than they have money, and so they're not need to be, but they can be.
So this might be related to the second question, is you're calling it an eco village?
Yeah.
And that means something in my mind, but I wanna know what it means in your mind.
Well, we're calling them eco-communities. And we call them eco-communities because they can be self-sustainable and Tim can describe this more, but they collect solar power, they collect water, and they compost. So they're units that can be off the grid, and of course, they can be on the grid. So either way. We call them eco-villages, or eco-communities rather, sorry, because really the crux of it isn't really necessarily just to get everybody off the street. It's to create a community atmosphere, a self-supported, self-sustainable atmosphere, a healthy lifestyle atmosphere. So we would offer things like urban farming inside the eco-village, generating income for the folks that are living there, as well as just generate community. But there's lots of different programs that can be run out of an eco-community.
Tim might speak to the sustainability elements of the house itself, structural elements of it.
As far as sustainability, what I've done with this, everything is recycled material to start with. The decking, the walls, the windows, the roof, composite material. So it's not new material coming in. It's recycled and it's recyclable as well when the life runs out. Its life cycle is probably 50, 60, 70 years. It's not going to be used that long and maybe taken apart and moved. That's part of the sustainability as well as being able to move it, take it apart, reconfigure it, keep going with the parts that way.
So it's different from Dignity Village. How?
Well, it's a planned community, first of all, and it's not particularly,
Well, how is it different from Dignity Village, which I helped, and I went to all those neighborhood associations to find a place, and we did not get a good reception, so I'm trying to figure out.
Perhaps the material and the aesthetics is what I would say.
Okay.
Theirs is recycled materials, put it gently. It's what's available to them economically.
Tim, what do you mean by that when you say recycled? Do you mean they're not built as foundations are strong, or when you were saying that, what did that mean? Quality, or what did that mean?
Sometimes it's quality or the perception of quality.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people, they think Dignity Village, they go, ooh, they're thinking, well, they've taken shipping crates and carts and tin and whatever and cobbled it together to make a house. Nothing wrong with that, but it gives the community a perception of, it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's
Well, I would like to add that, Tim's units, I don't know if they have kitchens like this. One in Dignity
Oh,
Village.
Dignity, yeah.
So I'm not knocking Dignity Village, I'm not saying anything bad about Dignity Village, I'm glad that there's somewhere for someone to go and sleep off the streets. But I think you can see the difference between a house that's been thrown together in Dignity Village and Tim's Village.
we've shown this to a lot of agencies, and sometimes the response is, how do I get one? People would like to have one of those actually. Incredible. You know, sorry.
Yeah, no mind, just kind of waving. So I don't really have any doubt that the small house model is the way that we need to go for a lot of these things. What my questions are, and I'm actually new to all of this, but my questions really rely more on the ownership and the management. So I'm just curious what you guys have looked into in terms of what you might recommend for different scenarios, different areas, in terms of private, government run and managed, or perhaps something like the cooperative model. And if we're talking about addressing houselessness and the crisis that we're having, maybe that's the focus that we would, as a commission, would want to look at here.
There are a couple different, well, there's many different models you could pick from, because everybody has their own idea of what these could look like. What I'm working on now is developing a nonprofit corporation that is going to oversee at least a couple. We'd like to get a couple built, and have it run through a nonprofit corporation where the rents are $250, and And so once it's all paid off, then we can take a certain percentage, a large percentage of all that rent money and put it into a fund where we can fund the next. So it's self-sustainable that way, and it replicates itself. So that's one model, that's the model that I'm working on. But you could also start an LLC and buy some of these and make a business out of it and still charge $250 or $300. So there's a lot of different ways to go about doing it. As long as the rents are cut down, then any way is good. You know, some folks are definitely in the belief frame of mind that they would like to see it run through a private company, a private limited liability corporation, so that they would have the control, so that they wouldn't have to worry about any of these nonprofit rules or any of these governmental rules. Whenever the government becomes involved and gets money, then you got a whole separate set of circumstances to work with. So even though there's many different ways to go about forming one of these and running it, initially, at least, I'm working on the nonprofit side of it, where of course you would lease these homes. Eventually, we would love to see homeownership of these small communities. Everybody would be a homeowner, and they would run it just like a condominium association would run a condominium association.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'd love to see as follow-up, personally, the business model and that kind of system.
The other model is that we have to talk with organizations like Join and the church communities in particular, who, in some cases where people can need additional support, that the church or Join can be responsible for taking that piece on.
Well, this is a very exciting and realistic and solution-oriented presentation today. We're so pleased that you could come, and this ties in very much. Did you want to make a comment? Sure. Okay, so comments first. I'm just keeping us on schedule. And we're over.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I think it's a great idea, and, you know, I don't, there's downside, sure, and so I don't want to talk about that now. But I guess my questions are, what are the downsides? What are the hurdles? And we don't have time to discuss that now, just not from the point of, you know, what are the things that we have to overcome to make this a reality, right? And what are the downsides? What are the hurdles that we have to overcome? Because I think this is the time. You know, I think someone a couple months ago made the point that we're 8 years into the 2-year fight to end homelessness, which is ridiculous to me. So if you have a wonderful solution like this, I can't see why we, you know, what can we do to help you move forward. The other thing is, and I don't, you may have already said that, are these units already in existence somewhere? Or
In Haiti.
do you have any, are they manufactured here?
They are.
Do you have any?
I have some that are being assembled in a couple of weeks in Newburgh, 3 of them.
I would love to, you know, I'm a visual person, and so I would love to see one of them, if that's possible, once it's completed.
Sure.
And encourage you to, if you haven't already reached out to city council, you know, so share that with them. So,
I have an idea that would fold this work with the things that I'm going to announce tonight from the Community Discovery Committee that will fold into this work. So if you have any more comments or questions, you could send them to me as the chair of CDC, and I will see that they're followed up when we meet with these fine folks when we're planning our roundtables on the solutions for houses and solutions for. And did someone else have some comments to me?
I do. Yeah.
Questions?
So I see it as a good quick solution to the problem of homelessness and to grow and probably the best option in order to get toward that 8-year fight to homelessness. But I have a question on, is it going to continue marginalization or gentrification of communities from the city center? Because how, that's, I guess, a fear of mine in this, because if we're building these communities, does that mean we're building them separate from the community of Portland so that they can get involved with what's going on downtown, politics, et cetera? And also just being a communications major, we look at not only how people communicate, but how classrooms and in houses and communities are organized and what they communicate. And I wonder if little houses would continue to preserve, I guess, that human dignity if it's supposed to be smaller, which means that communicates a bigger thing. And I wonder if we've been able to speak with the homeless community in the process of this.
I've spoken.
That plan right there, did you notice there's a play park in the middle? And each of these houses, there's 40 houses in that site plan. This was developed and designed specifically for a site in East Portland, Southwest. Each of the homes, there's 5 to 8 in a cluster, so you've got cluster, 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 and then a wider, larger area that could be a community garden or a play garden, or a play yard in this case. There are homeless children involved as well. It's not just me and you type of people. I was trying to give that sense of community there first, that becomes part of the larger community as well. Not to isolate them, say, here you go, but it's definitely.
In some respects, it's what's happened in the community for the last 50 years. We continue to move out and build smaller communities, subdevelopments, and sort of look at this and that, in that perspective. But I don't, but one of the questions I was going to ask, because I think many of you have given this a lot of thought, is I don't know how many the homeless belong to. I know that there has been, we have a lot of services here, and that keeps them downtown. But at the same time, as I talk to other agencies, they find that once a person is self-sufficient, they can kind of move away from these services. I think that's a good overall objective. I'm not suggesting that individuals that are either disabled or have other addictions or other things are going to be necessarily good candidates for this. But I think there is a very large part of our homeless population that would like to get off and be on their own and have that independence.
And quite honestly, we spend a lot of time downtown, so we see a lot of homeless people downtown. And so in our minds, we think that most homeless people come downtown. The fact of the matter is that there are homeless people all over the city, and they live in some horrendous situations out there, way out in the sticks. So the vast majority of the homeless people, you'll never see them. They hide. A lot of them are ashamed of being homeless in the first place. But we went to Lentz because Lentz has a lot of homeless people in Lentz. We're going to St. John's because St. John's has a lot of homeless people in St. John's. So just because we want to build one in Lentz or build one in St. John's does not mean, by any stretch of the imagination, that we're trying to pick one section of the city and try to improve it over the other. Those two places are large. There's a lot of vacant land out there, and they have a large homeless population. So that's why we picked those spots. But hopefully in the future, if these two come to fruition, then they'll be in a lot of neighborhoods, not just on the outskirts of the city.
Thank you so much for coming. This has been a very important and heartwarming presentation. Now I know why I loved teaching school in the St. John's community, a community with a very big heart. Our Community Discovery Committee is in the process of creating a roundtable Houses and the Solutions Forum. And we hope that you will want to be a part of that. And then our members that are so curious, that really want to hear more about what you're doing, will have a chance for that. And we look forward to working with you. I want to give you my personal contact information and to all of you. And we will be in touch because my very thought would be tonight I'm going to give a short report on what we're doing with the Community Discovery Committee. And I congratulate you for coming up with a humane and great solution for a dire problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
for coming.
And I think these two houses will contact you and maybe find some opportunity.
Yeah, you have the card.
We do want to hear from the public tonight, And we have several committee reports. See, am I on task here? Okay.
We have about 10 minutes.